as I mentioned, onboarding officers is this exclusive community. And by exclusive, I mean it is only for military officers. We are not looking to support civilians into these roles. And the reason I brought this about was because I believe there are so many people out there who can add so much value to boardrooms, but they just don't know how to, if you like, cross the border into that civilian domain. And I want to do everything possible to help you navigate that process. We start off the whole journey with what we've called an insight program, and that is divided into 3 specific modules, and they include, first of all, governance, what makes a world-class director, how to protect yourself and your company in that boardroom, how to make sure your CV is in an immaculate condition so that you get noticed, how to up your social media presence. We give you techniques on actually being in the boardroom and getting into the boardroom and actually exiting the boardroom. I mentioned that I had brought together some fantastic people, and I'm delighted shortly to introduce you to one of our ambassadors, Sean Bell. And our ambassadors are all military folks that have transitioned into a civilian world, and some of those have got vast experience in NED roles and certainly in executive roles. And then what I've called super NEDs. So whilst they don't necessarily wear the cloak of the Superman, or indeed Superwoman, these are civilians who have made a career out of portfolio roles. Both the ambassadors and super NEDs are there to support you, be available on chat rooms or on video calls or on email, etc. I would like to add, in addition to that, as are all the tutors. We've also assembled this amazing group of partners from DAC Beechcroft, who are our legal partner and where our events are hosted in London. DAC are an international firm, and they have a non-executive club, and some of our alumni have already benefited from going to those club events and dinners. We also have brought together some interesting headhunters. One of them is called New Role, which is a disruptive platform, and they are pushing out opportunities to our members as they have transitioned through the Insight programme. It is an invitation-only platform, so it's quite prestigious to be part of this. And unlike traditional headhunters, where it's sometimes what we might call a boys and girls club, you have the opportunities here to actually snatch jobs away from individuals because you're going to get the first dibs on those. And we also have recently recruited into our little family Mercia, who are a private equity investor who have 240 investments that they're on average looking for about 20 non-execs at any one time. And then the Business Growth Fund, which is a government-backed initiative, who are also got about 300 investments, also looking for opportunities to put people into non-execs in their investments. And we are mid-closing an opportunity with a TechTran organisation based in Birmingham. For those of you who may not be aware of what a TechTran organisation is, these are organisations that work with universities and academics, these academics are spinning out businesses backed by the university in part, and they're looking for people to go on their boards to support them through the growth of their business. And so we've really got some amazing organisation. We're adding to them all the time. So I've mentioned about our disruptive online platforms, but we also have the opportunity, which is a rare opportunity indeed, and that is for our alumni to come and actually sit in on board meetings and experience what it might feel like to actually sit in a real live board. And both our ambassadors and super NEDs are opening those opportunities. We will support you through both our network and our contact base, which is substantial, and we're there to support you pre and post your NED appointment. So we're hoping we're providing a real comprehensive service and support network. So Rachel, our next slide just shows a little bit about myself. So I guess you could say I'm a bit of a serial non-exec director as well. I currently hold 8 chairs as a non-exec chair, and as you can see, I've won a few awards. I'm certainly not an academic, and I don't have any sort of prestigious background, but I have learnt it from the bottom up, and I've certainly got a few stories to share with you, which, as I deliver the first part of this programme, I hope to tell you some, as it was, tales from the boardroom, which will hopefully resonate with some of you as you go through your journey. I'm now absolutely delighted to present to you Sean Bell, who is one of our fantastic ambassadors. And Sean has been really instrumental in helping us structure this programme to suit the needs of the military out there. And I'd just like Sean perhaps just to say a few words. He really has been so important in my own journey on this. Sean.
Yeah, welcome all. Thanks, Jo. Yeah, I'm an ambassador, and it is. I reflect seeing this slide. Although I left about 8-9 years ago, I don't. You very rarely ever see my rank appear on these slides because it was very. I'm very proud of my time in the military, but I haven't been in the military for 8 years, and I'm not defined by my military title at all. And the rest of it is about building experience outside. I'm an ambassador for this, not because. You can get training all over the place to spend your money. What's absolutely key here, and you'll hear it time and time again, is the community. My journey, I'm sure lots of you had business backgrounds. I set up my first business at 13, and I've been in and out of business ever since. And I think I genuinely believe that ex-military, particularly in the last 20 years, when you've all served a lot of time on live operations, have an immense amount to deliver to boards. The problem is there's also some blind spots that you come out with, and the most evident one is obviously money, revenue, P&L, and cash flow in particular. 80% of small companies fail in this country, and they fail for cash flow, not because they haven't got a good idea. And it's only once you're outside, and having been an executive chairman of a small company, particularly for a while, when you almost sleep with your cash flow model under your pillow because it's so important. And that's not something innately that many ex-military have. So I do think there's some really good training, but there's also some immense positives. I won't bore you with them now. My own journey, I went through the Institute of Directors to get my training, thinking and spent a lot of money, lots of really good training, popped out the end and was dumped. In effect, there's nowhere to get the experience to get on a board. And it's like an actor. You can't be an actor without an equity card. You can't get an equity card without having been an actor. And I think for me, what's absolutely key about this initiative, I'm unpaid, I do it because I believe in this transition, is Jo. It's Jo and the community. It's creating a link between the academic, what you need to get on, become a non-exec, and actually being introduced to the community who understand what you are, also understand what you're not, and are able to leverage your skills. There's a whole load more behind this. I won't waste your time now, but I'm here because I'm here to support you guys and girls, support Jo. So if there's questions during this or afterwards, please feel free to contact me and I'll do the best I can. Jo.
Thank you so much. And just to remind everybody, please do pose any questions in the chat box as we go along. Don't feel you have to wait till the end, so we can answer anything that is relevant as we see them pop up. I thought it would be really interesting as well for you to perhaps hear from one of our alumni. And Philip was actually in our very first cohort. So he's still serving, but he's managed to actually take up a position alongside this so that when he comes to possibly exiting, he's got some board experience. So Phil, if I could hand over to you, that would be wonderful. And thank you so much again for coming on this.
No worries, Jo, and thank you for inviting me. So I think the first thing that Jo's already said is I am still serving, and whilst I entered into the onboarding officers course, with a view to leaving, I've gained immense value from it already. And I guess I just want to talk to you a little bit about my story and what I've done since doing the course, what was a year and a half ago now. I got some early experience, as a number of us do, from board roles when I was in a military assistant role and subsequently on unit boards, which I'm sure many of us have served on. And my experience and insight that I've since had has shown that in those roles, you learn a lot about governance and ensuring compliance in a way that is very, very similar to what you would need to do in a civilian position afterwards. So there's a lot of good basis you've got there. I think the interesting thing is understanding that you've got it and knowing how to translate it, and that's where onboarding officers came in. So my story sort of started in 2018 when I was actually looking for a place on a mental health first aid course, and stumbled across a NED role that was non-executive director role that was advertised with them. And I applied because I was excited about what they did, and I thought it was a great opportunity. But I lacked the skills. I certainly lacked the experience, and my confidence in being able to bring any of my experience to bear was low. And whilst unsuccessful, Mental Health First Aid England kept in touch and have subsequently asked me to reapply for a role after I'd done the onboarding officers course, so I felt a little better prepared for that. And I think the experience of going through that process reinforced that I had some of the skills they were looking for, hence they kept in touch, but I was lacking in other areas, in particular sort of legal, regulatory, financial matters, which Sean has already referred to. So the onboarding officers course was an intense week. There's no doubt about that, but it armed me with a lot of practical skills, and I think that was the thing that was very interesting and refreshing about it. Is it took what Jo knew we had and said, well, actually, in this scenario on a board, you've already done this, you know this is how you'd apply it, and here is what you need to know that you don't know already that will make you really effective. And that was a really great way of going through the course. So it gave me confidence to apply. So I've since become a trustee with my daughter's school, which I'm sure is the kind of role that a number of people have had. But I think with COVID coming over the horizon, I think I realised quite quickly how my inherent military skills and the ability to translate those skills and understand the commercial context that the course had given me allowed me to bring that to bear. I've got a background, as some of us will, as an operational planner in PGHQ, and I've got a habit of scanning the news. What's going on in the world? Am I going to be dealing with this in work tomorrow? And that was really really useful, because in mid-February, bearing in mind we didn't lock down till mid-March, I'd sort of pulled the board together and said, well, actually, we need to start thinking about this. We need to look at those scenarios of, so if we've got no income for a period of time, how long can we survive paying the staff? How long can we survive not paying the staff? What do we wish to do as a board morally? And it meant come mid-March that we were just able to plug the government rules into those scenarios that we'd put together. And we were able to work out where we were very, very quickly, bearing in mind the flash to bang of you are to close your school to closing your school was about 48 hours, although we suspected it was coming. So I think what it highlighted to me is that I brought a skill set to the board that they didn't have inherently on the board from my military skills, but I wouldn't have necessarily had the confidence or the ability to translate that or to work with, my understanding of cash flow and our financial reserves and how we might deal with it, to be able to be as decisive as I was. And it got us a month ahead of the drag curve. And I hope a number of you will look at this and go, well, I'd have done the same. Well, I guess that's the point of my story is, a lot of us have got those skills already, and the opportunity to be upskilled, to be able to translate that into a boardroom is what this course can offer, and did me the wonders of good, and ultimately help the school and the parents to make the right decisions.
Phil, that's just the most brilliant story, and I hadn't heard that at all. But I mean, I really do think, and it's sad to say, really, but I do think that COVID has actually produced an unprecedented opportunity for the military to show just what they can to the board. And if we polished up those skills and gave you the confidence to process into that role in the school, that's just the best news I could possibly have. And thank you so much for that. Poonam, I think we've had a question, haven't we?
Yes, we've had a question. It's directed to Sean. Craig has said, good afternoon, everyone. This question is probably for Sean, having got his training through the IOD. I was contemplating applying for the training through resettlement, etc., but was wondering whether you'd recommend focusing on onboarding instead.
Yeah, Craig, good afternoon. It's a great question. The grey hairs here mean that in the past everything was black and white. Now it's shades of grey. I can't be definitive. What I can say is that what I think all of us need leaving the military is some basic skill sets of understanding the legal and fiduciary responsibilities of a board member, understand the language of finance, and understanding the way that you bring your leadership skills to bear in a civilian organisation, and particularly a non-exec role. And particularly, Joe's going to cover it, so I won't cover it now, but the specific non-exec doesn't need to be a specialist in the particular area. It needs to have lots of common sense and stuff like that. Now, the IOD does provide a very structured way of going through those courses, and because of some predecessors of mine, I signed up to it. It took me a lot of time, a lot of effort. Was the training useful? Yes. Did it give me a new language? Yes. But actually, I always saw that as a means to an end. I didn't want a certificate that says, well done, Sean, you're a chartered director, if that didn't actually count for anything outside. I wanted it to be a means to end, to get a chance to get onto boards and get myself my first start. The IOD, despite great aspirations, does not provide that link. And probably one of the main reasons I'm sat here in front of you today is not really to support a commercial organisation like Joe. What I am absolute believer in is that this is not just about training. It's about creating an ecosystem where you not only understand the limitations and the strengths of leading the military, but also gives you access into the boards, or at least people who are looking to bring you onto boards. There is no guarantee here. There is no silver spoon. Most of the work will have to rely on your lap. But people like Jo and her commitment to create an ecosystem here, a community, for me, makes this completely different offering than the IOD. If you want a certificate, the IOD provides a very good certificate. If you want to create a mechanism to get yourself onto boards, Joe's only been going at this for a few cohorts, and already the statistics look very positive, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in front of you today. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Sean. Very helpful.
I didn't know if Philip wanted to add anything further to that from his own experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'd say is I've not done the IOD course, but one thing I would say is the opportunity to tap into this network of super NEDs has been, fantastic. And I've had long conversations with very busy people who have done, are doing wonderful chair roles and board roles in various organizations, big organizations, who are totally signed up to this, and they are willing to provide their time to help advise people like me who are finding their way. And, that is one thing that I sense no other course provides, and that has been really useful to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please feel free to keep asking questions as we go along. And so just a little insight into the role of a non-exec director. As Sean's already said that, this isn't applying for a job as finance director or operations director. A NED is a generalist, and you are expected to have a level of competence across all sort of areas, particularly finance and governance. We thought that these were particular areas where I'm sure some of you are used to dealing with millions, if not billions of pounds of the budget, but you're probably not very familiar with balance sheets and some of the financial terminology used across balance sheets. And perhaps whilst you might have sat in command rooms, perhaps you're less familiar with boardrooms and the process of that. So non-executive directors, like every other director, are one amongst equals. They all have one vote each, as all directors do, regardless of anybody's shareholding in the business or their title. So as a non-exec, you're not running the business. You are part of the board, but you are there to support and constructively challenge the executive team to bring new ideas and initiatives. And I mean, as you've seen from my little profile, I sit on 8 boards, and I have to say, I don't feel that for the last 20 odd years I've really worked. And the reason I say that is because I absolutely love it. I love the work I do. And whilst it's been extremely challenging going through COVID for the last few months, actually it's provided a huge amount of opportunities to show what businesses can do if they have got somebody who can help focus on what really matters now. And I mean, I think Philip demonstrated that very well with his work at the school and preparing for what seemed to be the inevitable, which I can tell you most boards were almost putting their heads in the sand and hoping it wouldn't happen. So where you add value is helping the company define where they're going, and almost always, challenging in an appropriate way what the executives come up with to help them restructure and refocus on where that new world is going to take them. And in terms of some of the skills that you have, I mean, I've put here because I think it's really important, and I've seen this in abundance through our delegates that have joined the community, and that is that you need to have a great sense of humour. You also need to be a realist and a fantastic communicator. Again, these seem to me such obvious skill sets sitting in the military. As does being able to remain calm and providing a route in the crisis, whatever that is. And again, I think Philip's story resonates so much with this. We've got a real live example of how that's going. I also think a non-exec, whilst you may not at the moment have a whole bunch of contacts, it's surprising who you will know and who you will be able to introduce. And as you build up your black book of contacts, that is an important part of the process. The businesses that I work in are generally what we call SMEs, so small to medium-sized businesses, although the smallest is, several multi-millions, but I'm not working in billion-pound public companies. So they tend to be owner-managed businesses, and actually that's where the real fun is. And so quite often you have a lot of insecure CEOs, many of whom are suffering terribly from imposter syndrome. And part of the job is very important, is to coach and mentor them through, to be the person that they can feel they can turn to, and that you will listen empathetically to, and just be there, sometimes just to hear what they're going through, not necessarily always to provide immediate solution. And I've been doing a lot of that recently. So Rachel, if you could go on to the next slide. I mean, I've put here it's very demanding mentally, but I can't imagine what some of the stories that this audience have gone through. So the demanding mentally is probably a different sort of state of mind to what you're used to. But if you hold multiple posts, it's very important for the company that you're working with to be in the room with them at all times and to leave your own issues at the door. And it can be very full on that, and it has never been more so during these last few months. You also need to be able to change and suit the circumstances of what's going on in the situation. And because as a NED, you can sometimes actually be the one that the CEO not only wants to put their arm around, or you put their arm around them, but sometimes you can be a little bit of the sort of the person that they're going to attack because they don't know what else to do. You do need to have a bit of a thick skin. The businesses that I sit in are extremely varied. Waste management, technology, financial services, and my recent one that I'm most excited about is to be chairman of a perfume company. Now you can see that these are so different in type that I couldn't possibly have the relevant industry experience to suit them all. But I have to say, I find that actually easier if you go into something that you are less familiar with. Because the trouble if you go into an industry that you are very familiar with as a non-exec, you're much more likely to want to interfere with what's going on. So as you start this process, it's quite exciting to step outside your comfort zone in terms of what you feel, inside and out. So we go to the next slide.
I think Sean just wanted to mention something there, Jo.
Oh, Sean?
Yeah, Jo, if I can just to pick up on that, I think one of the things that a lot of people who are leaving wonder about is this brave world of business, and I don't understand how can I add value at all. If I can embellish what Jo said, the one thing that military guys do have is they have a degree of resilience. They're searching for clarity where ambiguity prevails. But for me, the single biggest thing that I use all the time, and I find most of my colleagues do, is start with why. It's amazing if you do the what and the why question. What are we here to do and why are we doing it? The number of times in boards or trustees, people are very wrapped up in the how, and they get really excited, particularly the executive, because they are really excited at fighting the next crocodile next to the canoe. And if you don't understand the business, you don't really care about the today. Where are you going? And if you don't know where you're going, how do you know which way you're going to head off? And I think that is something that all of the military, we do it, whether we call it different terms, strategic planning or whatever, but it's starting with the why. And that's the one thing, if you hold anything, go into a boardroom, ask the what and the why questions, you won't go far along. Sorry to interrupt, Jo.
Yeah, actually, I didn't know you were going to say that, but I have to tell you that when I'm actually doing this sort of development for non-execs, I say to them, the best question you can always use is why. Why are we doing this? Why are we not doing it? And that provokes a whole different view of things. And he pulls people out of the weeds. I think we have had a question, Poonam, for an introduction of somebody who's going to have to drop out. Poonam, you're on mute.
I can't see that question, Jo.
Oh, so I'm sorry. The gentleman that just posed that question, I couldn't read it all. It was asking somebody for an introduction. If you could pose it again, I'll stop mid-sentence when you pose it again. I'm so sorry. It doesn't appear to have come up on Poonam's page. Anyway, okay, so what are the opportunities? Well, I'm hoping to make it clear. You know, one of the things that people say about me is, you know, you're so full of energy, and that is because I have such a fantastic job. I really love it. It's hugely rewarding, even when things are going wrong. We've had an awful lot of things going wrong. And, you know, I usually say I can probably manage if things are going wrong in a couple of my companies. Well, I've had things going wrong in 7 of the companies over the last few months. And so it has been very full on, but I've enjoyed every single day of it. And what is really, really rewarding is that just a little thing can affect the business performance. So I had a real life issue last week on one of the businesses that I work on, where one of the funders was asking for the right to appoint an administrator if there was a default on the repayment plan. And at the same time, another funder in the same business asked for the same question, both of them fighting for this. And it looked like if one of them didn't get it, they were going to pull out. And so it was just my suggestion, and it sounds so easy, you know, to have come up with this, but they hadn't thought of it. Is why don't you ask them to share in a joint appointment of an administrator, you know, so that one of them doesn't get the upper hand, they both have to agree to it. And that resolves the situation. And, you know, the feedback from the CEO was, Jo, thank God, you've actually solved the funding problem, because one of them would have pulled out. And it just needed a simple rethink of it. So you need a lot of imagination, and you need a creative way of thinking. Again, that is something I think that this audience will have lots and lots, because you've always had to find ways to resolve problems that maybe the first route hasn't actually worked successfully. Now, while Phil has taken a job in a not-for-profit business, he's in an academy school, and obviously those are volunteer roles, and there are plenty of volunteer roles out there, and I wouldn't knock it at all. First of all, Phil's now building up a CV to show that he has got industry experience, because a school is a company, and he's got board experience because they have a board of directors. And of course, if you're not able to jump into a paid role like Phil, who's already serving, or you don't get a paid role immediately, don't worry about it, because you never know who's going to be sat at the table next to you who may have a business and go, wow, she was very impressive, do they want to come and talk to me? But you can make money at this. I mean, you can make some serious money at this. I would expect you to charge an absolute minimum of £1,000 per meeting. And certainly as, you know, your skill set improves, you can charge anything between £3,000 and £5,000 per meeting. Now, when I say per meeting, whilst that is going to involve you actually going to the actual boardroom, don't think that in between time you're not going to be doing anything, because of course it's not only reading the papers, but there's a constant interruption from the CEO or the other executive saying, what shall I do, what do you think of? And I was driving up to the coast over the weekend, and I spent the whole time on the car phone talking to this client about what they could do about appointing these joint administrators. And that's certainly not paid for. So it sounds quite a lot of money, and it is, but you don't work it out per hour. You cannot do this just for the money. You've got to do it for the love of it and for enjoying the journey. And you will meet lots and lots of interesting people, gain lots of experience that you can pass on to the next person or the next job that you move into. I can assure you that there's never a dull moment, and I think that's something that will appeal again to a lot of this audience. Whilst it's one thing going and sitting in a company as head of risk or whatever, there's nothing like sitting in multiple companies and learning from all their different positive and even from their failures. You're also going to build this book of contacts, which will be hugely important as you progress through your journey. So why do I think that this audience have got the right position to transfer into the boardroom? First of all, I think it's almost like said and done that you can always see a bigger picture. And as you can imagine, in SMEs, sometimes the CEO and the executive team are also the management team, and they're so involved with actually working in the company, they've forgotten how to work on the company. And a great NED can pull them back to that role, which as a board is what you're there for. The ability to challenge in the appropriate manner is something that I think will be ingrained again in your DNA. I've already mentioned that mentally this can be very, very challenging indeed, and you do need bucket loads of energy and commitment to do this. But if it's something that you love, and I've already said it doesn't feel like a job to me, then I do it because I'm just having fun. Things like influencing people, having a certain amount of gravitas and integrity, again, I would hope that these are almost given with this audience. But one thing that I would hope as well that you would believe that you'd have or that you would work on improving is a very high emotional intelligence quota. While an IQ is great, being able to read people and understand people and empathise with them is a very important part of this role. So I would think if we look at that little list, I can't believe that anybody is short-handed on any of these areas. But those are what I think are the skills that we should be looking for to make you into a great NED. Now, if we look at the next slides, these are where I hope that we will be able to improve on that skill set. So there is no doubt that you have to understand what happens in the boardroom. Particularly if you join an SME, perhaps the board isn't being run appropriately. And I've had an email from one of our alumni today saying he's got a new role. Could he have all the stuff that we went through on the Insight programme in soft copy, because he's going to introduce our new, the format that we have for board meetings and for board papers and for taking minutes and for our appraisal programmes. So of course we just sent it. Now he's got a ready-made pack of things that he can introduce. And of course, his board will think he's fairly amazing because he's come with this amazing toolkit. So it's already been mentioned by Sean about financial literacy. And I'm afraid I have to say to you that if you cannot read a balance sheet, then you don't really deserve a place in the boardroom yet. And whilst I'm sure loads of you are very financially literate in your own field, we want to upskill you so that when the finance director is talking fish, which is what most of them do, you will know what you should be asking them. And what you will almost certainly find, and I've been on another call today, and it was quite obvious there were people on this call who are looking for board positions who absolutely do not understand what they don't understand. That what I would hope at the very least you would go away from this is that what is it that you don't know and what questions should you be asking of the finance director. We want to give you an awareness of the commercial world and how it operates from the board level through the various ranks in the organisation and who can influence what. And our final module is on the marketplace and understanding how to strategically market your business. And again, we believe that marketing is probably not something that you've touched on in any sort of volumes. And so those are the skills that we hope we will give you to add to those skills that you already have. And some of the others that we think you have got in bucket loads include the ability to solve problems. We don't teach leadership as such because we believe we're talking to some of the best leaders in the world, but we help you understand how that skill set can be developed to use in the boardroom. And the thinking outside the box is again something that you know, you've had to do as part of your career. But at the same time, whilst a job as a NED is a overreaching one, we do know that it is very important to be careful of the detail, and you will find that lots of SME owners, CEOs, are really not bothered about the detail. And we ran a planning session kindly facilitated by Sean in the last couple of weeks. And it became very clear, I'm sure, to Sean, even if he won't admit it, that I soon lose interest if we delve into the details. So what you need is a boardroom full of people who've got a mix of skills. So I'm not saying that that is an absolute must for a NED, but it helps if you're working with a CEO such as myself, who just doesn't want to hear all the detail, they just want results. And of course, again, diplomacy. You know, sometimes you've got to tell a very, very difficult story to a very challenged CEO, and that requires a certain amount of diplomacy, again, which I don't believe for one moment that you haven't got. So of course, getting into the boardroom is something that we spent some time on in our first session, and indeed getting out of the boardroom if things aren't going right. So we talked to you about the networking. We've surrounded you with loads of interesting contacts. As I mentioned earlier, DAC Beechcroft have got a fantastic NED group and are already taking some of our alumni to events. Vistage, which is another partner, is the world's largest CEO organisation, and they're partnering with us to introduce you to their groups. We help you develop this elevator pitch. So what is it that you're going to say when I ask you, so what do you do? And that sort of moment that you grab somebody's attention needs some work, and we help you put that together. As we help you prepare a NED CV. So the CVs that you may have put together in the past, and some of you probably haven't put one together for a long time, look entirely different to get that CV. And one of our alumni on our first cohort, and Phil, I don't know if you remember him, Nick O'Sullivan, he got a job because his CV came to the top of the pile. He didn't get the job because of his CV, but he got the interview because of the CV. And it's because our CV, and I'm sure Phil will maybe perhaps comment, it just doesn't look like anybody else's CV. And so he jumped to the top of the pile. So we're here to support you through our huge community that is growing and growing and growing. You know, and every week now we're being asked other people to partner with us as we've been recognised as doing something very different. And so whether you start in a voluntary role on a charity or a school governor, or a not-for-profit business which is paid, such as a housing association, and you progress into the commercial world, we will do everything we can to support you on that journey. And so far, of our 5 events, because obviously we had to cancel our March event, more than 50% of our alumni are in post, and we think that is pretty impressive. And we've just heard of this other one today, so I think that's really good news. So finally, just before we open up for any questions, just to let you have a note of these cohorts, I think Rachel, my colleague, said there are 2 places remaining on the October cohort, because we only take 16 maximum people on these cohorts. The reason is I want it to be really special, tailored, and the ability to people feel free to ask questions. If we fill a room with 30 people, it's not going to have the same impact. We cancelled our March cohort because I chose specifically not to put it online, because this is a really interactive process and I knew it wouldn't work as well. And I think we have 4 or 5 places left on the November cohort. The March cohort for next year is fully booked, and the other cohorts at the moment, these are all got plenty of places. So if you're interested in this, you can see the contact information at the bottom of the screen. And I mentioned earlier, we would be actually recording this and putting it on the website. So that ends the formal presentation. Is there any questions out there? I mean, feel free, if you want to unmute yourself, to actually ask it, or if you actually want to type in a question, and we'll do our best to answer. Anybody got actually any questions?
Charlie Baggett-Jewett, where is the location? Hi. Well, where's the location of the course, and can you give us a little bit more detail about it? I imagine it's residential. Can you just give us some more?
It isn't residential, Charlie. The course is in central London. It's in the city at DAC Beechcroft's office. We have actually got preferential rates though on several local hotels, including the RAG, and that's where we didn't actually hold the June cohort there because they haven't reopened their offices, but we did hold it in the city somewhere near, so it will be in central London.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Charlie.
We've just had another question, Jo.
I think we've had a couple of questions, P.
Yeah, so the first one that we've had through is, to what extent do you think it would be valuable for a Navy lieutenant, Army captain to attend one of these courses? I can see that there is 2 different types on the website. Keen to build experience for the future. If at present I'm likely too junior for us to secure a role.
What were the ranks, please, Poonan?
It's Navy lieutenant, and in brackets, I think he's saying equivalent to Army captain. Yeah,
and the other one?
That's okay. It, Jo.
At the moment, probably at captain rank, this probably isn't appropriate for you. However, I just mentioned that we had a planning event last week with Sean and some of our colleagues. Because this program was set up really for more senior people who want a portfolio career. I would imagine at the sort of rank you are now, if you're thinking of exiting, you're probably looking for a full-time executive post. And whilst there's lots of benefits in our onboarding program that are completely transferable into an executive post, what we have decided to do is actually pull together a very specialist program for the more junior ranks who want to take up a full-time post, but that is unlikely to be launched until autumn of next year. You would of course be welcome, but I think it's probably not going to deliver exactly what you want at the moment. Sean, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and I've been challenging the team a bit about this because the danger is, the subtext is, it sounds elitist, that this is only for a certain grade. It's not about the rank structure. This is actually about the experience base and what those folks are leaving the military at that stage in their career, where they can add the most value, and that's where this course has been tailored. However, and I'm sure Jo won't mind me saying, when we were doing the planning session, my portfolio extends well beyond a very small cohort of crusty old grey-haired senior officers. It's looking across the whole spectrum of how do we help ex-military in the career transition space, because career transition workshop, all those things do, kick you out the door, but then it almost feels like the relationship's severed. And my own personal belief, I've set up several companies, I still operate a couple of my own companies as well, and I think the former military guys, particularly around the junior officer, low senior officer level, who have a career ahead of them, are very well suited to forming their own company or operating as an executive in a very dynamic company. But the roles and responsibilities of the board, whether you're a one-man team, an SME or a FTSE company, the board, the guidance for those people on the board still is exactly the same. And I do think that the DNA that most military have lends itself very clearly to be able to think laterally, but you need to know what you don't know. And that's what Jo's alluding to with potentially expanding the array of courses so that we provide an ecosystem that doesn't just deal with this stratospheric end, but also capitalizes on the DNA of a whole host of very talented people leaving the military.
So what we've come up with, and we will be developing this more, is a program specifically for individuals who wish to transition into a full-time job as an executive, maybe not immediately at the board level, and also another program specifically for military of any rank, to be honest, who wish to start their own business. But we only decided this a couple of weeks ago, and we're working on the content now. But as Sean says, everything to do with the board, whether you're an exec or non-exec, is exactly the same. But if you're not quite ready for that level yet, then I hope that these programs might be of interest to you.
Can I also, as an adjunct as well, Jo, I said at the front, but I'll repeat it again. One of the reasons I'm so favoured of this is for the particular offering that Jo's and the team are offering. It's that community of system, that's that ecosystem to help people translate the academic benefits into roles on boards. If the offering, once we start looking at how do we expand that to people in startups or whatever, that ecosystem has to look very different. And I think it's not just about walking to a classroom, paying some money and getting some training. You can get that almost anywhere. I think the unique offering that OnBoarding offers is that ecosystem. And if we're going to think this through to make sure the ecosystem is available for those both starting up businesses and preparing themselves for a life as an exec, there needs to be a little bit of thinking around that to make sure that the value proposition to the customer is just as compelling as the current one is for those senior folks leaving.
Thank you, Sean. Jo, I think it'd be really good for you just to mention the two different types of cohorts that we hold. That was partly on this question. I think it may help the audience just to understand the two different types.
Again, this was on the really valuable advice from Sean to say to look possibly at perhaps we should have different cohorts for different ranks. I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the content is identical, but Sean suggested that perhaps we ought to divvy up the cohorts into different types of ranks. And we can give you information on that if you contact us as to which cohort you might be more comfortable.
And just to be clear, Jo, I'm a bit sensitive about this. It wasn't trying to make it rank specific. What it was saying, because that sounds elitist and that's not what it's about. It's about saying that people who leave at a, let's suppose a junior rank or a flight lieutenant or a captain or a lieutenant level, probably are leaving at an age where they've got a complete full second career that they want to pursue. Whereas somebody who's leaving as a group captain or above or a one-star or above probably is in the later parts of their career and therefore might be looking at have different aspirations. And therefore, whilst you're absolutely right, but rather than going, right, you're this rank, this is the course, it's trying to say, where are you in your career? What do you aspire to do in the next chapter of your career? And how do we best equip you for that?
And we have had those conversations because we've had some more junior people who are leaving, but they've left 10 years ago and they've actually had loads of executive experience. And therefore, they're much better suited to go in the cohort where we've got one-star generals who are just exiting because they've got the experience at a board, but they probably now don't want to stay on as a full-time exec. They want to move into portfolio. So we do have an individual conversation with everybody as to which cohort best suits your experience and your future plans. So thanks for clarifying that, Sean.
Thank you, everybody. Jo, I don't have any more questions in the, my box, but do you just want to check your chat box just to make sure nobody sent anything directly just to you?
Oh, I didn't even know I had a chat box. This is exciting. Okay, so to what extent do I think it will be valuable? Oh, we've had that. I think I'm getting the same as everybody else here.
Okay, I just wanted to double check that you didn't have anything else that I didn't. But that's the questions that we've had. Please, if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and I'll unmute you if there's any difficulties.
Anybody want, if you just let us know, we can unmute anybody there. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you found that interesting. And thank you so much, Sean and Phil, for your input, as always. Hugely helpful to hear it, from people who are not actually involved directly in the business and also from a participant. So thank you ever so much, everybody.